Welcome to today's Producer Public Forum. Great to have you all with us. We've been waiting for these public forums, and this is going to be a good beginning. I'm Ajay Jakhar, a citrus farmer working with the Farmers Organization, Bharat Krishak Samaj in India, and I'm also the Vice Chair of Action Track to Shift to Sustainable and Healthy Consumption Patterns. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to some logistic issues for this 2-hour session we have. Please note that all the presenters will be speaking in English, and the verbal part of the forum is being interpreted in 2 different languages, into Chinese and Arabic. At the bottom of your screen, you will find an icon for this translation, which is interpretation. If you switch that, you will have that with you. The session is also live telecast on Facebook. Participants are welcome to introduce themselves in the chat box, and given that, due to the large number of attendees, this event is not set up as a meeting, but in a webinar format. We kindly ask you to post your questions in the Q&A box where all the panelists and attendees can see them. We will be monitoring the section, and we will do our best to answer the questions in the Q&A at the end of the presentations. Because of the limited time, we will only be able to take as many questions as we can, and also those posted in English in the Q&A box. We will try some of these questions verbally, and you're welcome to upvote a question. The feature is there so that we are able to choose a question which is most wanted, which is most preferred for the verbal response. Where we are not able to answer questions on the moment or in the Q&A box, we will follow up in the next weeks with a note to all the attendees. So that's really nice. We are ready here to start. And I believe Agnes is here with us. Agnes is the UN Secretary General Special Envoy to the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit. I request you, Agnes, to please share your opening remarks.
AJ, it's Alison. Agnes is just joining. Just give her a moment.
So should we wait for her, or we have Martin, who's a star at the Food Systems Summit, who's steering the head? Can we ask Martin to jump in here?
Martin, yes, do jump in, and Agnes will join shortly.
So,
okay, wonderful. Then
Martin, let me introduce you to everyone else. You know, let me introduce you to everyone else. So Martin is the UN Food Systems Summit Deputy Special Envoy, and I want to put one thing up front, that I've never met Martin in my life, but in the last few months, I'm in awe of his capacity and grit to steer this UN Food Systems Summit. Martin, the floor is yours. You're really inspiring. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Ajay, thank you so much for your kind words. And let me just jump in some minutes before the special envoy is coming online. Food production is still today, even in the age of big food producers, very much a family affair. And it's families, farmers who are feeding the world. And one of the biggest travesties really in our 21st century is the very people who are suffering from food insecurity and nutrition insecurity are exactly the smallholder farmers. So when the basic assumption of the Food Systems Summit is that our food systems are broken, this is one of the strongest indicators for that. And we know, it doesn't have to be this way. But I think that in order to change things around, in order to make food systems really a driver for the achievement of the SDGs and not an obstacle as it today is very often, we need to change the way we are looking at farmers and at producers. Of course, producers are producing food, but they are also our main interface with the planet. They are responsible, if you look at it, at our water supplies, at biodiversity, at sequestering carbon, at the natural carbon balance of this planet, because we often forget that, this is a well-functioning machine in which carbon is being burned by animals, by human beings, and it's coming back by plants. And there is a cycle that actually is enabling life on our planet, which is out of balance. What is needed often is not some high-tech gadget, but it is the empowerment of smallholder farmers. It's the realization of their rights. There's a whole framework of human rights not only the right to food, but the right to water, the right to a healthy environment, all of that, where we are far from the realization. So fixing our broken food system starts with empowering farmers, giving farmers a voice, sharing the traditional practices and knowledge that often got lost, and also very importantly, bring young people into farming, inspire them, give them the tools that are needed, and give them the societal recognition that is needed, and not least, quite simply, the money. Because very often farmers are under extreme pressure for prices. They are squeezed into commodity markets where they get absolute ridiculous amounts of money for the work that they are doing. And this really has to change. So for that, I'm very happy that we're having this Farmers Forum. And, you know, my last sentence of a greeting would be, this is a food system summit. And there is a good sense for this word system, because we can only get to the solutions if we break our silos, if we speak to people we would normally not speak. We need in this conversation you, producers, farmers, smallholders, but we also need to put you in touch with health experts, with ministries of youth, with ministers of environment, with water experts, to get the full picture and really work out solutions that work on the ground in a million different settings that all have one thing in common. They have to change in order to become a driver for a more equitable, more fair, and a more sustainable food system. And with that, Ajay, and my many thanks, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you so much. We will move on, and we will have Agnes come in when she arrives. She's got so much on her head. It's amazing she can take time out for so many discussions that are happening. I would also want to say that as producers, we again appeal to producers everywhere to put their voice into the dialogues and make the change we want. After all, we don't want to be the meal on the table that everybody else has been enjoying for so many decades. So if we get our voices in, we will influence the outcomes, and that will be good for the whole planet. I will move on to the next section, and I will ask on Estella Punanana, the Secretary General of the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development, AFA, to speak here and to give her perspective on the central role of producers in food systems and the opportunity of the UN Food Systems Summit provides for us. The floor is yours, Estella.
Thank you, Ajay. A pleasant good morning or good afternoon to all of the participants in this virtual meeting today. We thank the organizers for inviting us to make a presentation. The UN Secretary General called for the Food Systems Summit as a recognition that if everyone works for the transformation of the food system, then the work to achieve the SDGs will be accelerated. The centrality of humans' need for food has been again demonstrated during the COVID-19 pandemic. When governments announced lockdowns, the first thing that people secured for themselves was food. The food system is a complex web of activities involving the production, distribution, and aggregation, food processing, marketing, distribution and transport, purchasing and access, preparation and consumption, resource and waste recovery. There are so many actors in each of these web of activities, but family farmers take part in all the activities of these elements. Family farmers are the biggest producer of food. In fact, family farmers in Asia Pacific compose 70% of the total family farming population in the world. And family farmers and producers with average of 2 hectares or less of farm size produce 80% of the region's food, including aquaculture. Family farmers, through their associations, commodity groups, and cooperatives, can aggregate our members' produce and even process our produce that can add shelf life and value to our products. We also market our surplus or cash crops either locally, and some even engage in export crops or do contract farming for these crops. We are also consumers, as we seldom produce everything we need, or we can produce enough only for some months. We also cook and prepare food. In fact, some of us have prepared so many local food which have been part of the local culture and which have been innovated and fused by some other entrepreneurial chefs. And in all our farming activities, we generate waste and take initiatives to reduce and recycle waste in our farms and homes and facilities. That is why we say family farmers are at the center and at the heart of the food system, because family farmers have a role, a contribution in each element of the food system. That is why we say if you talk about food systems, we should be in the picture, because nothing about us without us. And because family farmers comprise from at least 30% to as much as 70% of the population in many countries, especially in developing countries. However, the current food system with all its ways and approaches is very much broken. It is a system that results to poverty, hunger, and malnutrition to millions of small-scale food producers and family farmers. A system that results to biodiversity loss, soil and land and ecosystem degradation, and where the youth is unattracted to agriculture, and where small-scale producers and family farmers lack the rights to land and forest resources, and have weak participation in the governance of the food system, since most of these elements in the food system are controlled by big companies and rich individuals. Therefore, we need to transform into sustainable food systems, which is productive and prosperous, equitable and inclusive, empowering and respectful, resilient, regenerative, healthy, and nutritious. I am sure that many producer organizations will agree the work for the transformation to sustainable food systems is something we have been doing for decades. The Food Systems Summit, we believe, is an opportunity and a space to strengthen our advocacy for various stakeholders to listen to us and to consider our challenges, our game-changing solutions, our policy and program recommendations to our governments, intergovernment organizations, business, and development partners. Many of us have embarked on initiatives on securing rights to lands and natural resources for men, women, and young farmers, climate-resilient agroecological approaches to farms, fisheries, and forests, strengthening farmers' cooperatives and enterprises to increase family farmers' market power and delivery of full value chain services to our members, and to be more strongly involved in the governance of these value chains, promote equal rights and equitable opportunities for women farmers, as well as attract the youth to agriculture. As you may know, the years 2019 to 2028 has been declared as the UN Decade of Family Farming, or UNDFF, which has been touted as an accelerator of the SDGs. The design and implementation of national and regional plans for UNDFF through multi-stakeholder processes, but with family farmers as key stakeholder and partner, will be a game-changing solution, as it will unleash the potentials and energies of millions of small-scale family farmers in the region to contribute to sustainable food systems. And lastly, in recognition of the capacity and the value of independence and autonomy and agency of family farmers, a game-changing solution will be to provide adequate and longer-term direct financing to national, regional, and global family farming organizations so that we can engage effectively in policy work and strengthen initiatives and partnerships, such as our current partnerships with IFAD, EU, GAFSP, FAO, and FFF, or Forest and Farm Facility. How can we as family farmers and producers and our organizations be involved? I'm on my last slide. Conduct independent dialogues at country level and regional level. AFA is mobilizing its members and partners for this. Engage in member state dialogues to amplify our voice. AFA will conduct multi-stakeholder independent dialogue where we hope to also explore partnerships for game-changing solutions. A group of regional FOs will also conduct an Asia-Pacific region independent dialogue tentatively scheduled May 31 to June 4. Partnership also with global producer organizations for a global FO independent dialogue tentatively on the third week of June. And participate in an advocacy communications campaign where thousands of family farmers can participate through Facebook and through giving materials, videos, and photos on family farmers' game-changing solutions. We encourage you to make your voice heard and influence the processes leading to the Food Systems Summit. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Estelle. I was on mute. I'm sorry. We are in a virtual world. Please use the Q&A chat feature to ask questions, leave comments. We are here to answer them. So to move ahead, we are fortunate to have here with us Yakanbi Hijaba. I hope I get your name right. Is a director of JASIL, an environmental and development organization working in Mongolia. He is a UN Food System Summit champion. Do give us your views on opportunities of the Food System Summit and significance for pastoral communities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ajay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Hijaba Ikhambai, representing JASIL and the Central Asian Pastoral Alliance, as well as International Support Group. So I want to tell a bit introduction about the importance of rangelands and pastoralists for Food Summit. More than half of Earth's surface and over 75% of land in Central Asia is classified as rangeland. The productivity and sustainability of these lands are direct impact to livelihoods and food producers, which is more than 500 million pastoralists all over the globe. Millions benefits from these rangelands for food as meat, milk, and other agriculture products. Pastoralism contributes to food system well beyond its livestock output. That's research done by Niamar and Manzano. Many innovations are used for sustainable pastoralism. For example, in Mongolia, as in many other countries, introducing now the traceability system, which is starting from preparation of animal husbandry products, such as milk, meat, and others, from herders' households or community, up to delivering to final consumers, based on information communication technology. Pastoralists producing about half of the agriculture food. And pastoralists, as Martin said, is regarded as family pastoralists. And almost 80 and 90% of them done by women. However, women involvement on decision making only less than 20%, for example, in Central Asia. Therefore, currently ignoring the many beneficial aspects of pastoralism for the economy, environment, and the human health. Environment, I mean many other issues are environmental benefits. Pastoralists are food producers in many ways, as I said, but they not much supported in the processes. Therefore, I want to highlight some specifics of the pastoralism. Please, next slide. One of major effective strategies in pastoral agriculture is mobility. Mobility supports restoration and shifting of pastoral land use practice. Mobility reduces environmental externality cost for both economy and ecology, like carbon sequestration and supporting, minimizing rangeland degradation, and keeping ecological balance between rangeland capacity and animal husbandry-based food production. In Mongolia, for example, thanks to mobility and the shifting of and rotation of pasture, in last decade, around 10% of degraded rangeland was naturally restored. That's a big achievement in sustainability indicator. Most rangelands around the globe as common property. Therefore, tenure rights less secure than other land use. For example, in Mongolia, now organized pasture user groups cover totally 23 million hectares of rangelands by rangeland use agreement, which is only 32% of all rangelands in the country. In Kyrgyzstan, 434 pasture committees covering total pasture land, with only short-term annual pasture use tickets to the herders or pasture users. In Kazakhstan, latifundistas who owns pasture land and releasing to other pasture users for higher price or just keeping land for coming good period of time, which is decreasing the food production and impacting livelihood of rural population in the country. Please, next slide. Therefore, we would like one solution to engage pastoralists in the summit processes, recognize and respect pastoralism, and promote mobility as sustainable method of food production. Support Mongolian government proposal to declare International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. As you know, it's ongoing now. And we are happy that Family Food Summit is coming together with UN's General Assembly in end of this year. Increase investment in mobility-friendly pastoral agriculture. Development of mobile and distant services for pastoral communities because they are very diverse and sparse. Support women and youth in pastoral communities for food systems. Recognize rangelands in the role of livestock in maintaining natural ecosystems like carbon sequestration and other many environmental benefits. Please, next, my last slide, please. And for that, we need to involve government, producer groups like pasture user groups, civil society, scientific committee, and of course, UN organizations and donors. To improve land tenure in common property regime with possible allocation of pasture land users and ownership of rangeland and natural resources. So we need improve legal tenure. Applying through cost accounting of rangelands and adjust its indicators with macro and microeconomic indicators at national level, at international level. That's a very big achievement. I think we will go on that. It will be big our task. And finally, introduce in every way the traceability system for marketing of pastoral food products to certify its origin, they produce it as healthy rangeland, healthy animals with environmental friendly pastoral agriculture, which will support for food, which is consuming and which is more than half of food produced by agriculture sector in the globe. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Hijaba. Thank you so much. I think so you raised really pertinent questions for pastoral community. And now we have Agnes Kalibata, the UN Secretary General Special Envoy to the 2021 UN Food System Summit with us. I will come straight to Agnes. I will request Agnes to please share her remarks and comments. Agnes, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all. And it's really great coming after all the speakers that have gone before me, because it gives me a chance to get a sense of what people are worried about, things that we should be focusing on, but also the opportunities that the summit brings to producers. Yesterday, I was in a similar meeting with the youth. And for me, today to be in this meeting with producers is really how we bring the food system summit conversations back together in dialogues that matter to people, that matter to producers, that matter to young people. I want to bring out just a few issues, probably 3 issues, just to help us as we go into these conversations, make sure that we go back to these points over and over again. Our food systems are challenged. Many of you have said that. The previous speakers have said this. But COVID-19 has shown that this is really one of the biggest challenges of our times. But I also want to underscore that vulnerability comes to farmers, as Esther was saying, farmers at the center of our food system, and any vulnerability that impacts our food system impacts our farmers, impacts producers. And I want to make sure that the food system is seen as an opportunity for us to think about how to get producers of all types from all walks of life back on track. We know that even before COVID-19, we were having challenges from climate change, from inequity, from the fact that of the 740 million producers, 2/3 don't necessarily have the right levels of nutrition and live in poverty. This is not acceptable. And this is partly why we are having this conversation about food systems. So for me, the second point I want to bring out here, and Esther has already said it, and the previous speaker has also said it, we need to hear your voices. We need to hear producer voices. We need you to ensure that the things you want to see are visible to all of us. We need to understand that this is one of a lifetime opportunity where you as producers get to step forward and talk about your own game changers from where you're sitting, and talk about things that would make a difference to you to ensure that your lives are secured and livelihoods of producers are secured. So it takes me to the last point that I want to make. For us to change our food system, it's going to involve all of us. It's going to involve a lot of things, but most of all, it's going to involve all of us having conversations and accepting to compromise on some of the things that maybe we are already beginning to see that our planet can't handle from a food systems perspective. So what are those things? What are the compromises that you need to be making as producers? What are the compromises we need to be making as in different parts of the value chain? What are the things that you bring to the table as we come to the pre-summit in July? What are the things that producers bring to the table? But also, what are the things that you must get from all of us to get food systems back on track? You are the biggest stakeholders. Yes, all of us are stakeholders in the food system, but you're at the center of the food system. So what do you need to see from the rest of us? And I'll end on one note. What do you want us to stop doing to get food systems back on track? So if you put those three things in the conversations that you're having, the things that you bring to the table as producers, the things that you want all of us to do to support you to get you to do your work better, but also the things you feel like all of us should stop doing to ensure that we get our planet back on track, to ensure that we ensure prosperity for all of us. What are those things? And how do you ensure that your conversation brings out these elements? So I wish you good conversations. I wish you good deliberations. Like Esther has said, I would like you to take advantage of every opportunity of dialogue at national level and in these groups where you're meeting as producers, as farmers, as livestock people, as fishers. I really need you to understand that your voice is extremely important. And we've designed the summit so that we can hear from you. This is the opportunity you have, and just send it to us. Make sure that you get heard. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Ajay, and I look forward to the deliberations of these meetings. Thank you again.
Thank you, Agnes. Thank you for your inspiring words. Thank you for reaching out and telling people to get to us, to the Food System Summit with their ideas. We are open to ideas of all sorts of ideas. And thank you for your tireless leadership in working on this Food System Summit. Thank you so much. Martin, back to you. So Martin, the floor is yours. We look to details and the overview of the action tracks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ajay, and thank you, Dr. Kalibata. What you see here on the screen is a recollection of the 5 things we want to achieve with the Food System Summit. There's a statement of action by the Secretary General where we really want to encompass everything we have been hearing over this 1 year of preparation. We are looking forward to a large number of member states making commitments on 2030 pathways. And You know, we have now more than 110 countries doing national level dialogues, and they result in this multi-stakeholder action we need for food systems transformation. Number 3 is a set of multi-stakeholder commitments, action, and coalitions, and I'm going to speak more about that. 4 is vibrant communities, in particular youth movements. And with events such as today's dialogue, we are really bringing the people together that need to speak. We see a global community emerging on food systems practitioners, but we also, and most importantly, see very many local and regional communities coming up. And last not least, this is a SDG summit. So the summit moments, the pre-summit in Rome in July, and the summit itself in September in New York, will only be a starting point really to the 10 years that we need for the achievement of the SDGs. Can I have the next slide, please? So I was just speaking about the country level dialogues, and what's really interesting is we had expected that many countries would come to the UN with requests for technical support. But the 2 main things we are hearing from countries are basically, number 1, in every country, there is a committed group of individuals in government and society understanding the centrality of food systems. But it's really a help that the Secretary General is convening this summit in September, as it's bringing political energy also to the country level. For example, we have, as I said, more than 110 countries by now doing food system summit dialogues. And in many governments, this has been a discussion for months about which minister should be leading this portfolio. And that is very good because it brings the conversation really on a cabinet level, on a heads of state level. And the second thing we are hearing from countries is, how do you do food systems transformation? What's needed for that? And we are trying to answer these questions on the basis, on the propositions that we have been receiving, on the basis of the many inputs we are getting from the country level dialogues and from the action track process. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is to recall the 5 action tracks of the summit. So our central thinking machine, if I may say, which is about ensure access to safe and nutritious food for all, shift to sustainable consumption pattern, a nature positive production model, building and advancing equitable livelihoods, and build resilience to shocks. Can I have the next slide? All of these 5 action tracks were open over many months now for input from all walks of global society. We did a first cut by mid-February of this year, where we have been receiving already more than 1,200 ideas. And it's important to say that they were coming from many different directions. They were coming from academia, from indigenous people, from producer organizations, which is actually the lion's share, as you can see, and by member states directly. As diverse as the world is, as diverse were the proposition we have been receiving. And we try to boil that down to basically 107 big areas of work, which you can find on the website foodsystems.community. Now, while we worked on clustering that and bringing that together in a way the world can engage with, we also have been open for a second wave of propositions, which we just closed by 1st of May. We are still looking at the input, but we are way above 1,000 propositions again. So altogether, we are looking at more than 2,000 propositions that were coming from all over the planet. Can I have the next slide? Now, what did we do with these propositions? We were looking at them with a set of criteria to say, are these scalable? Do they support the SDGs? Are they based, most importantly, on human rights? Are they supporting, in the spirit of the Sustainable Development Goals, those furthest behind? And that's sort of the basis of this pyramid that you're seeing there. We've been boiling them down now to about 100 clusters of game changers. And I'm saying that to make clear that we did not eliminate solutions unless something was really, not serious. But behind every propositions we have been receiving are people who are feeling strongly about it, who are doing that, who are having experience with that, and we wanted to honor that. And when we were doing the clustering, we actually brought it together in a way that we can focus several of these ideas that are similar around cluster areas and can strengthen them. So you know about the structure of the 5 action tracks. We have now built under these 5 action tracks 14 action areas, which you see in this slide. We will share the slide deck with you. I don't need to read all of the different points, but if you are, for example, interested in restoring degraded ecosystems, you will find that in action track 3. And you will find, for example, the central role of domestic animals for holistic grazing, for bringing devastated land back into agricultural land. So below every one of these boxes, you will have a set of clusters of actions that you can connect with in order to be part of this global movement. Now, remember the slide that I showed you about the interaction between the countries and the action track process. What I said is that we have been looking particularly to answer the how question. How do you do food systems transformation? And this is why at the bottom of this slide, you got this horizontal box on governance and planning, which really is co-owned by all 5 action tracks. And indeed, all of the boxes you see here are done by people who are not only coming from one expert perspective. So again, if I speak about restoring degraded ecosystems, that's a nature positive solution. At the same time, it's building livelihoods and equities. It's building resilience, and most certainly it's building better food access for all. So we are trying to weave together the different systemic aspects to really bring a change in the way we look and we implement food systems in our daily lives. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is our timeline. We've been coming out with these areas of actions, with the clusters of actions below them. We are showing them to the world. We are listening to your inputs. We started by consulting our member states because this is a UN process, which went really well by mid of last month. And now we are showing it to civil society, to science, to our different levers of change, to our human rights people, to our gender people, to get their feedback whether we got it right, and to fine tune and to hone our proposition so they really match. Can I have the next slide? And I think that is already the last one. Let me just say that on the website foodsystems.community, you will find all of the action tracks, and in a couple of days, all of the action areas with the possibility to connect to, because in these action areas, we really want to build coalitions around these clusters of solutions, and we would love to invite you to be a part of that. And with that, Ajay, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. That was a good beginning, and you bring clarity to the UN food system process. If there are questions, we'll keep coming back. It allows one to understand fully what appears at first to be very confusing, but that's how clarity comes back. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience. Patience is absolutely essential for changing the food system summit. You know, patience is the only thing that farmers have when they plant a crop for the rare animals. Moving on to the next very important section of our public forum for producers, which is where different action track representatives will come and explain the work of their various action tracks, the game-changing solutions, action areas. Absolutely certain this is going to be a lively session today. I'm going to be introducing the speakers one by one as their turn comes. We will not be counting downwards as usual. It gets boring and repetitive. We will go from action track 5 and we move on to action track 1. So the first speaker is Ellis Buckle, founder and director, Climate and Sustainability for Action Track 5 on Build Resilience to Vulnerability, Shock and Stress. The floor is yours, Ellis. Ellis, can you hear us? Are you there? It's yes. Ellis is maybe got disconnected for a moment. We'll come back to Ellis. Can we move on to action track 4 in the meantime? If that's fine, we can move on to action track 4. Can you? So the action track 4 speaker is Carl Deering, a senior technical advisor for partnerships and research at CARE, will present the work of action track 4 on advanced equitable livelihoods. Carl, if you're here, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, AJ. Yes, I'm here, and good morning and afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. I've just got 3 slides, I think it is, so I'll take about 4 minutes of your time to summarize equitable livelihoods, advancing equitable livelihoods. And of course, just to start by saying, when we talk about equity and equitable livelihoods in food systems, we are invariably talking about justice, because we need justice to drive equity, and justice is based on rights and eventually then in legislation and the law. And I want to acknowledge and thank Martin for his stress on rights in his opening remarks, because that is basically underpinning everything that we're talking about in Action Track 4, and we're working closely with other action tracks and the team, particularly on the right to food within the UN system. So I want to move on briefly just to reiterate that for Action Track 4, our focus, our attention has been on supporting empowerment of family farmers. That's been mentioned already a couple of times, at small scale food producers. And I want to just ensure or kind of reassure everybody that for us, we are hearing from all angles that does include, and want to call out particularly communities and livelihoods groups dependent on mountain ecosystems, on wetlands, on forests. We've talked about pastoralists, and I really appreciate Hijaba's interventions on pastoral livelihoods, but also obviously other livestock keepers, fishers, crop producers, but also seasonal labor and landless labor and migrant informal labor, whether it's formal or informal. There is migrant labor in production systems. So I want to stress that that's an issue that's being looked at very closely in Action Track 4. And of course, across all of those livelihoods groups, then there are different identities, right? Indigenous persons, women, youth, disabled people. These are all identities that bring differential levels of capacities, of vulnerabilities, and opportunities, and that's the kind of differential that we're trying to rebalance. So the next slide, please, Yishuan, very briefly. I'll take people through a few examples. So we've got 3 clusters. Martin described the cluster system, and our first solution cluster is around rebalancing agency. And a few examples here are improving social dialogue mechanisms for advancing decent work, social justice, and human rights. So these are often established social dialogue mechanisms, and where they're not established, we need to advance the establishment and rollout of social dialogue mechanisms. Then integrating gender transformative approaches for equity and justice in food systems. This is something that's finding its way, of course, across all action tracks, the stress on gender and gender equality in our food systems. And then at the top is measuring women's empowerment in agriculture. That's a more specific solution, which is around driving at data for equity, and particularly addressing the vulnerabilities and discrimination, bias, exclusion that women in agriculture face. Promoting and protecting tenure rights, that's also been mentioned by Hijaba, and that looks differently in different places, and there's always a lot more to be done on driving that as a solution that will deliver equity in food systems. And then there's a lot of stress on youth as well, that's finding its way into different solutions. The next slide, please, Yishuan, and I'll go through the second cluster, which is about worker exploitation, eliminating exploitation among producers in food systems, but also ensuring, obviously, decent work in food systems. Just back one a second. Yeah, thanks very much. So the top one there is living incomes and wages for small-scale farmers and agricultural workers. And of course, there's significant global and domestic legislation on that. So we want to drive that, systematize that, improving governance of labor markets, effective implementation of labor standards, which are already indeed set and have been part of a drive for equity in food systems for quite some time. Addressing child labor and forced labor. This is, I put those two together. They are actually two distinct solutions that have come through, but because they are distinct issues. But addressing and tackling child labor and forced labor within food systems is a hugely important area. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, labor rights of migrant workers in food systems. This is important, and of course there's a lot of differential vulnerability there, because some migrant workers in production systems have legal protections and some do not. The next slide, very briefly, is the final cluster, and that's on localizing food systems. This is essentially democratizing, driving the democracy of local food systems and the sovereignty of local food systems. And a few examples here are farmer field schools. This will be familiar to a lot of crop producers, but it includes pastoral field schools and fisher schools. So any form of social and technical learning that is farmer-driven, farmer-led is an important solution. Farmer seed networks, that's perhaps more a subcategory perhaps of learning, but there are lots of rights issues and equity issues to do with seed sovereignty and the ability of producers to save and trade and barter and buy and sell their own seeds. Scorecards for social accountability, that's essentially about building the agency of farmers through social accountability mechanisms, which is connected with social dialogue mechanisms, but this is more about farmers coming together, demanding improved services from duty bearers, from service providers. And that could be obviously state service providers as well as private sector service providers. At the top then, there's a matching fund for small scale producer organizations. That's more at the macro level, but it's driving at increasing access to finance for producers, either as individuals or as members of cooperatives or producer groups, to be able to access working capital, investment capital, to grow their businesses from micro to small to medium enterprise. And then agritourism, that's a solution that just came in this week that I thought I would put in there because there's a lot of opportunity in developing agritourism if the right enabling environment and investment channels are there. So I'll leave it there, Ajay. That's a very brief summary of Action Track 4 and some of the solutions that are pertaining directly to producers. And of course, there are a lot more, but that's as much as I can get into 4 minutes.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. Please stay on. We'll be returning to you after the other speakers in the panel have had an opportunity. So this is getting exciting. Now we'll move on to Action Track 3, Boost Nature Positive Production. We have with us Isabella Cosniel, Deputy Director General, ICIMOD. The floor is yours. And please keep to the time because we are running a little behind schedule. So thank you so much for that.
Okay. Thank you, Ajay. And can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So thank you and good morning, good afternoon, good evening all. So I am going to speak to Action Track 3, which, as you can see on the slide, is all about how we can boost nature positive production at scale. Next slide, please. This action track is chaired by João Campari, and we have a very active group, advisory group members. And in terms of what this action track is really focused on, we recognize that the production of food and agriculture presents an opportunity not only to meet the global demand for safe, nutritious, and enough food, but to do this within planetary boundaries and to help us meet the absolutely critical global goals of climate, of health, and of biodiversity. And of course, we all know how important that is, particularly over the last 12 to 15 months, where COVID has demonstrated to us how important it is to address these global issues. In terms of what we really will focus on and are focusing on within this action track, we want to look at production systems that are regenerative, that are non-depleting, and which do not destroy the natural resources further. And in terms of taking this forward, we believe that we should focus on both land and river and seascapes. So we're really critically focusing right across the land and water domain. And we're focusing on 3 areas: how we protect ecosystems, how we manage them, and how we restore them. And the focus is really to build more resilient and more productive food systems, which can deliver human, animal, and environmental health. Next slide, please. So in terms of what this means and how we move forward, so in terms of protecting natural ecosystems, we are focusing on protecting natural ecosystems from further new deforestation and new conversion from food and feed production. Obviously, we're very aware that natural ecosystems are being destroyed from other reasons, but our focus here is really on food and feed production. And we are looking at solutions that will better help us safeguard these ecosystems. We know they're vital for production in terms of the global hydrological cycle and the ecosystem services that these ecosystems provide. And coupled with that, we focus on management of existing food systems so that we can manage the land and the water that produces the food in a more sustainable way. And here we're looking at the kinds of solutions that will increase input efficiency, that will internalize externalities, that will increase yields critically, but within planetary boundaries. And we'll look at what benefits we can get from further investment in agroecological and agrobiodiversity practices, again, for this triple win of production, of health, and biodiversity and climate. And finally, restoring degraded ecosystems and rehabilitating soils, which are the bedrock, of course, of production systems. Next slide, please. And what does this mean in terms of the kinds of solutions that we're working on at the moment? Of course, as Martin said, we're also going to be looking at the second wave solutions. So far, we have 20 solutions on the table. We're currently in the process of streamlining these and discussing them. I'm going to very quickly highlight some of the what's coming through. So under Protect, we've got some exciting initiatives coming through here, looking at how we can transform commodity supply chains, how we can reorient subsidies, how we can better incentivize working across the land and freshwater nexus, how we can improve trade standards, moving through to manage a whole series of exciting ideas here, ranging from how we can better invest in innovation and research and development to better support nature positive production, how we can look at scaling out agroecological systems, how we can invest more through new investment funds in this kind of work, since it's been underinvested up to now, blue food systems, how we can look at Indigenous people's rights and conservation issues, which of course is also very closely related to the Protect work stream, and of course looking at regenerative agriculture. And finally, in terms of restore, we're looking at how can we restore the vital grasslands, shrublands and savannas, which we heard about, of course, from one of the producers around the livestock systems. And of course, how can we improve monitoring and data with all the technological developments we have now, so we can better monitor and know how we can pinpoint and target investment in critical areas. And finally, creation of a soil investment hub, which would be a global initiative to address soil health and carbon sequestration. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to producers, who very exciting, and look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. This is a people summit, not just heads of state deciding a future. We are bringing people from all over the world together and getting people to find solutions to what is difficult, and where people and farmers and producers find it difficult to reach out to the governments, we are giving them an opportunity, and we want everyone to come in here. So I think we will move on to the next speaker. I think Alice Buckle is here from Action Track 5. If she's here, we can move on to Action Track 5, which is on building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stress. Alice, if you're here, Alice, can you come in here now? Is Alice here? No, I think so. She's still having connectivity issues. Can I request you to get Action Track 2 slide here, please? So we'll just do Action Track 2 slide first. Yeah, that's nice. So I'm the vice chair for Action Track 2. I think so. I will run through these slides and I'll try and save time because we are running late. Can you move to the next slide, please? Next slide. No, the next slide. Sorry. Yes. So initially we started off with wave one propositions, where we looked at three different parts, which is food environment, food demand, and food waste. And some of the solutions that came in, all the solutions got tagged into these, but I will not spend time on this slide. This is just to show how we progressed over the last 2 months. This is how we actually began. Can we move to slide number 2, please? Now, slide 2 very clearly shows us that we have 2 action areas. One is enabling, inspiring, and motivating people to enjoy healthy and sustainable options. And that includes food environments, marketing strategies, food offerings like school feeding programs, and how do you get traditional and local knowledge. I'll come back to this again. And Action Track, the other action area we have is slashing food loss and waste and transforming to a circular economy. I'm happy to say China is already, I think so, announced something of yesterday or day before on food loss, which is fantastic, which I think is also one of the things that happens when governments focus on Food System Summit. And this is one of the early gains of the Food System Summit. I should say thank you to China for that. Initiatives that engage and incentivize countries' businesses. How do you change because 30% of the food is being wasted. And as a farmer, I can tell you that most of the research money that's going in is going into productivity, increasing productivity. We can make a balance where we are able to improve our farming practices and our ways and actually save the world going on. Can we move to the next slide? And that will explain these two action areas very well. So in action area on enabling, inspiring, and motivating people to enjoy healthy, sustainable diets, we're looking at educating using behavioral economics, school feeding programs, and where you see on the slide is which action tracks are involved with us, where this goes together, because this is an integration with action tracks. This is not a silo approach where every action track is working separately, and this slide very clearly shows that. So we're looking at dietary guidelines that will allow consumers to make better choices, where there will be front of pack nutrition labeling, where consumers can see what's coming in. And similarly, we have physical policy instruments, because as a farmer, I realize that farmers don't grow what they want to grow. They basically grow what consumers demand and what governments incentivize. So this is exactly what we're trying to do, is use physical policy instruments that could include government policies of how they incentivize. And it would also include taxation maybe on unhealthy food, which could include foods high in unsaturated fats, salt, sugar. And these are the options that are on the table, which are being discussed. And how do you make it easier for consumers to make healthy choices, which will drive healthy production on the farms? The other part is food is never waste. We are hoping that 150 countries will agree to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. And this is going to be a game-changing idea and solution, because that much more land does not need to be brought into cultivation. That much more intensification of agriculture will not be required. There's a lot of on-farm and post-harvest food loss happening in lots of developing countries. I think if we have financing mechanisms available, these things can be tackled. I'll be here to answer questions after this. I think so. I'll just end the Action Track 2 presentation here and come back into my role as a moderator for this session, and we will move on to Action Track 1. Action Track 1, we have Senior Technical Specialist at GAIN, Stella Nordhagen, and Action Track 1 is Shift to Sustainable Consumption Patterns. So if you're here, can you please come in and explain to us and to the people watching on Facebook, people here with us on this call on Action Track 1 work. Thank you.
Sure. Happy to, Ajay. So yes, Action Track 1 aims to ensure access to safe and nutritious food for all. Next slide, please. So this entails working to end hunger and all forms of malnutrition and reduce the incidence of diet-related non-communicable disease. It requires that all people at all times have access to sufficient quantities of affordable and safe food products. And it means increasing the availability of nutritious foods, making it more affordable and reducing inequities in access to food. And we feel that food producers come into the work of our action track in two different and interrelated ways. The first and most obvious is food producers produce the food that all of us eat. So ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all has to fundamentally begin with supporting those producers to provide that food for all of us. At the same time, we also recognize that food producers, particularly in low and middle income countries, are often among the ranks of those who suffer from hunger and forms of malnutrition themselves. So addressing hunger and malnutrition also means we need to work with producers to increase their incomes, increase their access to markets, and enable them to access safe and nutritious foods for their own households. Next slide, please. So as Martin already described a bit, the overall process, Action Track 1 has been quite busy. We've collected a large number of ideas from many different sources, including about 600 different submissions through a public Google form, including meetings with stakeholder groups, including brainstorming, including reviewing expert reports. And now we've been trying to sift through those and define 3 action tracks around which we want to organize our work. The first is promoting food security and reducing hunger. Second is improving access to nutritious foods. And finally, we aim to make food safe through our third action area. And currently we're in the process of clustering all the different ideas that we've received and connecting them into these action areas to further develop them in the lead up to the pre-summit and summit. Next slide, please. So this gives you a little idea of what these clusters of ideas and what the ideas within them look like. This is very much still in a work in progress. Just last night, we were shifting around some of these clusters, so I'm afraid this slide is already a bit out of date. But the action areas will remain the same: promote food security and hunger, improve access to nutritious food, and make food safe. And we have a number of different clusters within this, currently 12, which focus on various pathways to achieving each of those goals, with the understanding very much that these are all interrelated, not only within Action Track 1, but also, as Ajay mentioned, across the different action tracks, and that we're really all working together to try and address these joint goals. Next slide, please. So then that action area 1 about kind of reducing hunger, we have two particular clusters on small scale farmers and empowering farmers that I just wanted to zoom into a little bit, because it gives you a bit of an idea of the different types of ideas that we've received from the public and stakeholders, and how we're trying to fit these together to come up with clusters of ideas that make something even stronger than the individual ones. So one cluster that we have focuses on small scale technology to raise farmer productivity. And within this, we're putting things like solar powered irrigation, soil health, precision agriculture, fertilizer, seed policy, high yielding varieties, and agricultural mechanization. And those are all different types of technology, but we feel that by grouping them together and coming up with coherent, coordinated approaches to scaling up access to that type of technology, we can have a broader impact than through any of those individual approaches alone. And you see a similar thing with the other one on the right-hand side of the screen about empowering farmers. So there we're working with African youth in agriculture to get them engaged and keep them engaged in agriculture as a livelihood, working on index-based livestock insurance to try and provide a bigger buffer for livestock farmers that are often very vulnerable to climate shocks and market fluctuations, nutrition-sensitive agricultural extension to try and integrate better between nutrition and agriculture, which are often seen as kind of two separate areas, and supporting women's land rights, because access to land and control over that land is a fundamental step towards being able to be empowered and being able to increase one's productivity and one's production. And across all of these different clusters, we find that gender equity and decision making is a key cross-cutting area that we want to make sure is integrated into all of our work. So that's just a quick update from what's going on with Action Track 1, and happy to take any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your quick, very crystal clear points. I think so. We'll quickly take a few questions. And Martin, there was a comment that came in that which is like, how can people get in touch with action tracks, or how can one specifically get in touch with one action track? If you could dwell on that, because one or two questions that came in about where all the solutions could be accessed has already been answered in the Q&A. So how can a producer get in touch with a particular action track? Can you comment on that, please? Can we have the, yeah. I think so. Again, we have connectivity issues. We'll move on to Esther. So Esther, there is a question. Esther, if you're here, there's a question for you I've got, which says that how can we reach more family farmers to get them engaged in the summit? Esther, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think we really need to have more massive awareness raising among family farmers. So we start with organized groups. So in Asia Pacific, we are working with regional farmers and fishers and indigenous peoples organizations. We have networks. And so we are planning to have an independent dialogue, and before that independent dialogue, awareness raising sessions among our members. And we are also planning to have an advocacy campaigns, and we hope that we could announce it to as many organizations, NGOs who work with farmers and other farmers organizations. We are also planning to translate some of the key documents about the Food System Summit to make farmers aware. So it's really, I think we need to have one basic document, and then have volunteer translators so that we could reach to many farmers. We want to also use Facebook and other social media accounts, because we know that some of the farmers also use Facebook. We also have we are also in contact with the community radio broadcasters associations through the FAO ComDev Asia to be able to also use the community radio in making announcements about the Food System Summit and getting the perspective of the family farmers. If you have any other ideas, please, you could contact us. In my PowerPoint presentation, we said we put our email address there, and we will be sure to help you reach to some other colleagues and partners in your country who would be doing, who would want to do the similar thing, awareness raising on the food system side.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Esther. I would urge all panelists to give their email addresses in the chat. So if anybody wants to reach out to you directly for questions or for solutions or for ideas, just for clarifications, it'll be very nice if all the panelists could give their email addresses in the chat. We have the next question for Yakambai from Mongolia. I hope you can hear me. The question is, strong perspectives you have given and touched on the emerging theme in the summit is the true cost of good. What can Agnes and Martin do to ensure this issue is given strong visibility and government, private sector and investors support this?
Thank you, Ajay. Yes, this is very good.
And I hope I get your name right. Can you pronounce your name for everybody? We don't want to do it again and again.
My name is Hichava Ikambai.
Ikambai, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is a good question, because the accounting, natural resource depletion accounting, sometimes we are saying it's like environmental and economy accounting, all green accounting. So that all things like sometimes like in happiness indicators, like environmental happiness indicators, like in the case of Bhutan, for example. So this all is, my idea is assess, value the degradation of natural resources when we are using ecosystem services. For example, when we are using agriculture, animal husbandry, how rangeland is degraded, when we are using forests, or how is forest degraded, or what is the environmental benefits and what is benefits for carbon sequestration. So that also includes assessment. So if UN already has methodology of environmental economic accounting, something like satellite accounting, many developed countries using it at satellite accounting. And we are proposing not only developed countries, but also developing countries try to use this system for a satellite accounting to know how natural resources, state of natural resources is degrading or not, how we are sustainable managing. So that's, I think, I mentioned that we need to adjust this through accounting indicators with macro and micro level, adjusting at each country level. So that's, I think, a good idea will be if we will try to implement at much.
Thank you so much. Please put your email address. If people want more clarifications, they can reach out to you directly. That's inspiring. We have another very good question. This is for Action Track. This is for Action Track 3. Isabella, this is for you, if you can hear me. And the question is, Isabella, the question is, why is it just the livestock system that needs a transformation to create jobs, secure livelihoods, mitigate climate change, and improve health? Is this not the role of, also the role of agriculture production, if I would say, of all agriculture production? It sounds like Action Track 2, but it's a question for you.
Yes, maybe because of perhaps some wording which we have on the slide, but of course it's not just about the livestock system. It has to be about water-based food production systems, as well as other land-based agricultural production systems. So we are not just focused on livestock, but I do believe that under the restore, when we mention grasslands and savannas, those are some of the most degraded land-based systems. And so there is perhaps a slightly greater focus there on pastoralists and mixed farming systems. And of course, we're also aware that livestock systems have challenges in terms of climate emissions as well. So we have to short answer, we have to consider right across the board, but we also mustn't forget the critical role of livestock systems and some of the particular challenges that they also face. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I think the other point that I can just add to this is that livestock is not one kind of system. You have industrial animal farming, and you have pastoral economy, you have smallholder farmers. For regenerative agriculture, you need livestock. So there are different kinds of, even the livestock sector has many types of things. We'll move on to Carl. This is for Action Track 4 on advanced equitable livelihoods. Carl, the question to you is, it's a good question. Has Action Track 4 has a right-based approach? What kind of mechanisms would you recommend to ensure these rights become substantive and are not just normal rights? This is especially applicable to the global south, where informal economy is poorly regulated.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ajay. Thanks for that. And I mean, this is a question that's been asked since the Universal Declaration, right? Because it's an ongoing journey to realize rights for all. And I'm going to just spin through a few areas actually in response to this that are relevant to Action Track 4, or at least that are coming from solutions in Action Track 4. I mentioned a couple of them already, but one is to make rights substantive and to realize them. It does involve capacity strengthening and capacity building, which is around also awareness. So we've got some solutions that talk about training programs and investment in awareness raising around rights. And that's not just for citizens and state, that's for the private sector as well, because there's clearly a need to increase awareness of rights, and therefore awareness of the responsibility to help realize rights in the private sector, the public sector, and the voluntary sector. Gender transformative approaches, the more we integrate solutions that work for gender equality, the more we will drive towards the realization of women's rights and other rights. So by integrating approaches that work in food systems, that is, these are steps in the journey towards rights. Investment, we've got a solution on a trust fund for indigenous peoples. If indigenous peoples have more resources to be able to protect and enhance their own knowledge, that will help them to protect and enhance and promote their own rights. Scorecards for accountability. Accountability drives better responsiveness from duty bearers and service providers. One or two more, if I may, AJ. Legislation, I mean, it sounds obvious, but domestic legislation lies with the responsibility of the state, and that is obviously a way to enshrine rights frameworks in the law. And finally, maybe voluntary guidelines. The UN system has done a lot of work over many years together with civil society and other stakeholder groups to develop voluntary guidelines that drive not only towards the SDGs, but towards the realization of rights. The guidelines on tenure, for example, is an obvious one, but there's also more recently, guidelines on nutrition and emerging guidelines on gender equality as well. And industry standards, principles, the principles for responsible investment in agriculture, the principle for free, prior and informed consent. The more industry understands the standards and principles, the more we will progressively realize the rights we're talking about.
Thank you. So there's a question in the chat for Stella, and this is I think Stella would want to answer. This is Nakme Kuenga Namge. How can we make nutritious food affordable? Often the local nutritious food are expensive, and the governments seem to be doing little to help low-income families get the financial access to nutritious food. Would you like to take that?
Definitely, yeah. I think that's such an essential question, Cuenca, so thank you for asking it. I think there are 3 routes that we need to take to making food more affordable, nutritious food more affordable, and probably all 3 of them need to be pursued at once. The first has to do with boosting incomes. People can't afford food if they have too low of an income. So within the food system, that's a lot about increasing farmers' incomes through increasing access to market, increasing production quality, increasing productivity. For others elsewhere within the food system who are not producers, it's about increasing wages, increasing access to technology, to skilled jobs, to training that can allow them to boost their incomes. And it's also about social protection and making sure that there is that safety net there for people who are poor to have access to additional income to be able to buy nutritious foods. The second one has to do with the price of those foods. Right now, it's estimated that a large portion of the world's population just can't afford a nutritious diet. And in many cases, the cost of nutritious food is several times that of staple grains or of less healthy processed food. So we need to rebalance food prices. Part of that has to do with interventions throughout the supply chain to reduce loss. For example, high levels of loss of fruit and vegetables, particularly with low and middle income countries, tends to really drive up their prices. So there's a lot of kind of win-wins we can do there to make nutritious food more accessible, while also reducing environmental impacts by cutting food loss. In addition, improving infrastructure to make supply chains more efficient can work to reduce prices for consumers without making them lower necessarily for producers. So there's various different interventions to reduce food prices. And then I think a final one is around reforming the way that people think about affordability. There are some foods that are just simply not affordable if you are on a low income, like dairy products, fresh fruit and vegetables, often very expensive. And there are others that actually are fairly affordable when you look at the numbers, but people don't choose to consume them. And that's often things like legumes, like beans or lentils. Often those are quite affordable, actually, and there's a lot of people who aren't eating them who could afford to. So we need to understand a bit more about why people make choices around which foods to eat and which foods to prioritize with the money that they do have, to be able to try and kind of shift diets towards those nutritious foods instead of other foods. But all 3 of those are important pieces of the puzzle. So
thank you so much. I'd also, Stella, want to add to this that as farmers, we are becoming more and more dependent on markets for nutrition. If the national governments were to make programs where farmers could do some backyard poultry, do some home gardening, kitchen garden, we could not only save money that we would spend on food that's coming from miles and thousands of kilometers away, it would also give us local resilient food, which adds to biodiversity. Thank you for that great answer. So Martin, there's a question that's been on the mind of many fishers. How are fishers also part of the Food System Summit? It's because everybody keeps talking about farmers and producers, and fishers think, where are we? So can you just list those apprehensions, please?
Thank you, Ajay. Just yesterday, we had a big seminar on blue foods, and it is indeed something which often is ignored, and it's so vitally and centrally important. And I think blue foods and food from the oceans is a fantastic example of the systemic nature of food systems, because the current really scandalous situation of illegal and uncontrolled fisheries are not only depleting the world's oceans and killing fish stocks to a point that it's very difficult to make them ever recover. They are simply stealing protein from the world's poorest, because the poorer a country, the higher the dependency on fish as a protein source. And it's artisanal fishers who are suffering most under illegal fisheries, because when the big industrial trawlers are gone, there is no fish left for people in coastal fisheries. So a protection agenda for fish stocks is also an agenda that supports the world's poorest. And here I think we have strong partners with Pacific Islands and other small island development states who are increasingly understanding themselves not as small islands, but as large ocean states. And they are at the forefront and in preventing overfishing, in preserving fish stocks and building it up. But it's not only fish, there's also a very innovative agenda around the use of seagrass, for example, which is a very nutritious food, and it's something that we can sustainably scale up. So indeed, we need to have a diversification of our diets. We need to look at the full picture of everything that is producing food for us. It's also herders, rangers, it's foragers, and so on, to get the full pictures of food systems, and we have to work and support all of them. Back to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Martin. So would you want to give some reflections, final reflections on what's happening about producers, about the next two? We have two more producer public forums coming in for different paths, for different geographies. And if you have any final comments before we move to David. David has to also be running. We're running a little late. So any final comments, reflections?
Well, it's very simple, and we heard that already today. Nothing about us without us. Food is in the hands of more than 1 billion people who are working every day. And as we just said, who are going fishing, who are looking after the animals, who are looking after gardens, who are producing grains and so on. This is the backbone of our global food systems. And the Food System Summit would be a failure if we wouldn't listen first and foremost to those people who are bringing us food on the table. And in that agenda, the most important point is really agency. We need to empower people to stand up for their interests, to get fair prices for their work, to get working conditions that are decent, and to get the recognition from society that they deserve. COVID had us talking a lot about essential parts and essential workers of our society. I couldn't think of anything more essential than producing food for people. So we will be continuing doing fora for food producers of all sorts. And I would very much hope that you spread the word about this fora, that you use the possibilities to engage. We can only be as inclusive as people coming forward and working with us. Thank you, and back to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Martin. I would want to, as an individual, because I'm a moderator, but I would want to use this opportunity to give a personal comment. As producers on this planet, we look to the Food System Summit to give true value of production to us. That's the bottom line. We get better value we get true value for our produce. Only then can we meet climate change targets that we've set for us. I just want to leave that message before we move on to David Navarro. He's the strategic director at 4SD, the architect of Food System Dialogues, and he will take us forward on this. And I also want to use this opportunity to say that I worked under David's leadership, and it's always been a learning experience. We at Bharat Krishit Samaj often lined up making self-assessment based on thinking, what would David say when he saw our work? So David, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. We cannot hear you. David was here. He just messaged me he was here. So can I, while we are waiting for David to come in, can I just, Martin, ask you one question, which somebody was asking, how can they reach out to a particular action track or to action tracks directly? What is the way to do it if they want to reach a particular action track?
I could give back and say, write to Ajay, but I don't want your inbox to be completely overwhelmed. I mentioned, and I will put it in the chat box, there is the foodsystems.community, which is not only an instrument really to reach out to the action tracks, but I very much hope that it will be growing up as a community instrument, not as a top-down or bottom-up communication channel, but as a peer-to-peer, exchanging your practices, asking questions to the community. David is online now. Ajay,
thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ajay, for that wonderful. Thank you for your wonderful introduction. I'm sorry I wasn't able to react by coming in just on time, on cue. Thank you for your patience. What a really excellent meeting this is. And I look forward to the other 2 producer forums that are coming in the next few days. I really enjoyed the presentations. I mean, it's clear to everybody, shifting and rebalancing food systems is vital for the future of people and the planet. It's a political process, and really it involves raising the ambition of all world leaders around food and putting food into its proper place. We don't live without food. We can't exist without it. We perform well if we get the right food. So why isn't food more politically significant? Well, this summit, hosted by the UN Secretary General, focusing on food and where it should be by 2030, is surely the right way to push the issue higher up the political agenda and to get leaders engaged. And engaged not just in thinking about maize or beef or other produce, but actually engaged in thinking about the people in food systems. And so that's where we've been really now for some months, because the desired process for the summit is it's inclusive of all actors. It's informed both by science and experience. It's locally sensitive because food systems are local, but it focuses on justice, on leaving no one behind, and on hard to reach situations. So because of the complexity of food systems that Estrella referred to so well in her statement, it means that really we have to find ways of engaging multiple stakeholders and their web of interactions in the preparation for the summit. And that's why, as you've heard from Ajay, and we're hearing it more and more now, Dr. Caleb Bhatta has said, I want structured dialogue. I want multiple perspectives, diverse stakeholders coming together, even though we're in this terrible situation of COVID, which makes life so awfully difficult. But let's try before the summit to explore options for shifting systems in different situations so that we move towards sustainable and equitable food futures for all. And when I say we, I mean the world. And so I actually have listened to Dr. Kalabata and indeed to everybody, Martin and others involved in the summit. And I'm really seeing it as, in a few words, moving from what needs to be done to who, when, and how to get it done. That's the shifting into the practical elements of action. But we all know that's difficult. We all know it's political. We all know that bringing different stakeholders together, despite their tensions, is never straightforward. And so that's why we have been working on a system of progressive, structured dialogues that can move towards pathways for food systems to be sustainable and equitable by 2030, but focusing on the key decisions that need to be worked through now and working on those in coalitions of action. Now, I want to stress that middle part, focusing on the key decisions that need to be made now, because actually to get food systems right, we have to look at the challenges of production. We have to look at the challenges of consumption. We have to look at the challenges of climate change and health issues, because these are tough issues, but we have to deal with them now as a community in order that food systems can be got right by 2030. And so that's why dialogues are being used. And let me just tell you the progress of the Food Systems Summit dialogues. First of all, how are they being done? Well, the focus is on wide angle approaches to food. Food from the perspective of all the Sustainable Development Goals. The focus is on local food systems. The focus is on multiple perspectives from diverse stakeholders. Yes, we invite people to use a particular method with small discussion groups that are looking 10 years ahead. We invite people to shift, to identify conveners for dialogues who organize them, curators for dialogues who are the masters of ceremonies, facilitators for dialogues who make small groups happen. And we invite everybody to understand that this way of working does unlock some of the fixed positions, does lead to opportunities for change. Now, the approach that we use builds off the 5 action tracks that you've heard about, and the dialogue conveners in every situation work out how they would like the dialogues to work. They're in charge of deciding who will attend. They're in charge of selecting the discussion topics. They're in charge of actually making sure that the dialogues are useful. And so always remember that it's the dialogue conveners that are in charge. So that shifts me now to giving you a quick report on where the dialogues have got to. Each country has been invited by the Deputy Secretary General to start doing dialogues. And you heard from Martin that 113 countries have actually nominated national dialogue conveners and are starting their dialogues. Actually, we expect 130 of the world's nations to actually do dialogues. That's an incredible number. It really is, everybody. We weren't expecting this level of interest at all. And Martin told you that the conveners of dialogues are becoming more and more senior. Now it's quite normal to get told that a prime minister or a senior official in the prime minister's office is going convening dialogues. 4 months ago, it was not like that at all. In the national dialogues, what typically happens is there's an initiation session when all stakeholders are brought together to talk about the summit and the dialogues. Increasingly, those initiation sessions are actually being done in public. They're done with a lot of media. There's radio, there's Facebook, there's spotlighting particular moments. And I think that that is very exciting because that means that governments are saying, we actually want everybody involved in the national dialogue process. The second stage of a national dialogue is deeper exploration. And that's when quite often independent groups are doing dialogues. The independent dialogue process is happening at the same time as the exploratory part of national dialogues. And typically, a national dialogue convener reaches out to the conveners of independent dialogues and says, hey, come and be part of us. Even though you don't agree with us, we'd like you to do it. And we've seen that in Nigeria. We've seen that in many Latin American countries. We're seeing it actually in quite a lot of European countries. Also, we're seeing it in the US. So this is becoming a very exciting collective effort. And it's also great because there is diversity. At the end of the exploration stage, there's a consolidation when the national effort focuses on the pathway to the food future of 2030 and identifies the key decisions and works through who's going to be involved in the national coalition that Martin referred to. That's all happening now. And inclusion, though, is a challenge, everybody. You know, COVID is making it so hard to have face-to-face meetings. And so people are trying to do their dialogues using these kinds of platforms, but it's difficult. You know, farmers who are struggling trying to produce food, often in fairly isolated areas, they don't have internet access. And so connecting with those who need to be included is a tough part, but producer involvement is increasing in all the dialogues. And I love it, listening to the national conveners. I talk to about 10 of them each week and sometimes more. And they're all telling me, yes, we know we've got to get the smallholders in, the fishers, the croppers, the livestock keepers, the forest dwellers, indigenous people, as well as others, and we've got to have them involved. So, just reaching the end. You said, Estrella, nothing about us without us. And I want to add to that. nothing about food without producers, without valuing producers, and without also really valuing what they produce. We have to always remember that most of the food that people eat in our world comes from small-scale producers. So if that's the case, and if it's really important to involve family farmers, let's try to just at all times make sure that in the coming weeks and months up to the summit and beyond, all dialogues about the future of food systems involve, include, and are influenced by producers, especially small-scale producers. We are watching this trend in the Dialogues program, but we want to amplify it. And so we'd love to work with you to do everything we can to make sure that producers are in all the dialogues. Independent dialogues, like again, we've heard referred to, they're fabulous. They push the energy and the issues. And then the national dialogues, producers in there, so that no national dialogue takes place without producers would be my motto if we can get there. And then even in the global dialogues, where the big issues around links between food and water, food and the environment, food and energy, food and young people, where all these big issues are being considered, again, never without producers. Thank you again, Ajay. Thank you for your leadership. Brilliant.
Thank you you really energized the session. We should have got you speaking first, I think, you really put energy into the session. Do you have time for one question?
My next thing, I've postponed it and I've got 7 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, just 1 or 2 minutes. Producers, I'm finding this coming in from many countries in informal chats outside the UN Food System Summit, that producers are having difficulty in getting their voices into the national dialogues. I know it's beyond your scope, but if there is a magic bullet that you can give us or a wand that you can blow around, and how do you do that?
Well, I mean, the great thing that I can share with you, Ajay, is that out of the more than 100 countries that are doing dialogues, honestly, many of them are still at what we call the framing stage. Okay. More and more, they are looking at the action tracks. And it's wonderful, Ajay, that the action tracks have come out with the action areas, that big single slide with the 15 action areas. I think that from our side, as we talk to conveners, we must just include in the discussion, and we must be really tough on ourselves. We must say producers, especially smallholder producers, there. And if they're not there, you really should be asking why. Of course, not everybody who's doing the dialogues gets that point, so we have to keep saying it. But I would love also the action track leaders, as they are doing their focus on the different action areas, just to remind everybody that producers are relevant to all 15 of those action areas that were in the big slide at the beginning. And it's a case of just getting the language so that everybody is saying it. I'm having producers in my dialogues. I'm having small scale producers in my dialogues, and I'm making sure, even better, that small scale producers are in every discussion group in my dialogue. Then it starts to really have meaning, because you get the CEO, you get the government officer, you get the local mayor, and there's the farmer there amongst them, and everybody gets the point. And just simply having farmers visible, perhaps they might even be dressed a bit differently from some of the others when they're in the dialogues. That's great. And I want that. I want a really big identity and visibility for the producers in the dialogues. Thank you very much, Ajay.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much. We will let you go now. Thank you. It's time. Thank you. Martin, there's a question for you. And the question is, how are the proposals being evaluated to ensure that they're based on sound science?
They are. We have an independent scientific group with 27 members, but really they are connected to hundreds and thousands of scientists around the world. And I rather use the word knowledge than science, because the scientific knowledge is a bit of it, but indigenous and traditional knowledge and practice is as important as the latest sciences. Now, our action tracks are led by highly competent experts in their fields. You know, Professor Lawrence Haddad is a globally renowned expert on nutrition. Professor Salim Hook is one of the leading researchers on adaptation and resilience worldwide, and so on and so forth. So everything that's coming in is shared with the scientific group, peer-reviewed, and we get clear feedback from the different groups around areas that need to be better defined, that need to be strengthened. But it's not, and I want to repeat that, it's not like an academic exam where you pass or where you fail. We see and we appreciate the engagement behind every single proposition. And we are working in a spirit of not eliminating solutions, but looking at them in their context, trying to bring them together with other initiatives of similar intention, and really work to strengthen and build it up. Also, our propositions are out there, so there is a tremendous bit of what I would call swarm intelligence of people who can look into these solutions and comment from their perspective. And again, this is something I really hope happens on the foodsystems.community side, which will be as good as the people who are registering with it. I hope that answers the question, RJ.
Thank you. I think so. That answers the question very well. I think we will, Martin asked, because we are very close to closing time. If one of the action track representatives here would want to respond to something that they have heard or something that they have read in the Q&A or in the chat box, or they've got some final reflections, if each could take a minute and dwell on those. If any action track has something special to add here.
I think very briefly, AJ, it's Carl here, Action Track 4. I think Martin put it very well. The question about scientific evaluation, because there is, of course, different forms of science and knowledge. And I would also add and reiterate the rights issue. Whether a particular solution has quantitative or qualitative evidence of impact or not. If it is based on established rights, then it is a solution worth pursuing. That's the only addition I would make, because it gives us this process gives us a huge opportunity to drive towards realization of rights.
Thank you, Carl. If there's no question, I have a personal question for you, but we'll wait for some other action track if they want to reflect on some point. If there's any action track representative who would want to come in, this is your last chance to come in. And please speak up if anybody would want to come in. And so, Carl, because I would want to take this opportunity to ask you this question, that this is coming into discussions more and more often, and especially when you look at what civil society may also be saying, this thing is coming as a challenge of a trade-off between benefits between producers and dealers in food systems. You think this is something that can be tackled in a way that equity can be built into the Food Systems Summit? We are doing a Food Systems Summit. The United Nations is doing a Food Systems Summit because we realize what is happening is not right and equity is missing. And this Food Systems Summit is going to deliver that. That's what we're focusing on. But do you think it's possible to get better terms of trade for producers in equity?
Yes, I do, AJ, and I won't unpick the detail here, but certainly trade is a huge aspect to this, and it started to come in early in the process and has grown in as an issue for more attention, both subnational trade, national, sub-regional, regional, and global trade. That definitely has to be part of the solution here. And again, rights legislation and the principles of equity and justice do need to come into do need to come into all the solutions on that, including what other colleagues have said across other action tracks, issues of sustainability and resilience and productivity, so that all of us have equitable access to food.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. Before I come on to the last part of the section where we call upon Vijay to come and explain this, what we are also seeing is a consolidation in the food value chain that has been happening, especially David is gone, but he realizes it. Because of COVID, it's been accelerated. The value chain between food, agriculture, retail, and technology. And I think this is the kind of power structure that the Food System Summit is looking at. And it is open to ideas. There's nothing that's off the table. It's not a negotiated settlement. As Martin very clearly told us, everything is on the table. Please stay engaged with us. And I will now say thank you so much for everyone coming in. We have to work together. We have to support each other. And that is how we will make this a journey of a lifetime. Stay safe, eat, and stay healthy. And thank you everyone for this. Before I hand over for final comments and to Vijay Kumar Thallam, he is the co-vice chairman of Rayata Sadhikara Samastha, a farmers empowerment body in the state of Andhra Pradesh in India. They are at the forefront of rejuvenative agriculture revolution, if I may call that. Vijay, do wrap up the events and also explain the next steps forward. Vijay Kumarji, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Andhra Pradesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you for the opportunity to put in some of my thoughts. But I think it's been such a rich discussion. So I'll be, doing injustice because I've filled pages listening to various eminent speakers, right from Dr. Agnes Kalibata, Martin Frick, David Nabarro, and your lively comments in between. And especially, I'm very grateful to Estrella and Hijaba for coming out with the point of view of the producers very forcefully. And if one phrase sums up, and that is, I think either Martin or Estrella said this: nothing about us without us. I think that's one comment which will stay with me, and I hope with everyone. And I also like what David mentioned later on, that this cuts across all the solution areas. So the producers, farmers, pastoralists, fishers, and farm workers, all of them are critical producers. So I think I would say the speciality of this session, and it's really a reality check for all of us in the dialogue process, that the perspective of the producers has to be a very critical lens in each of the solution areas, and especially in the case of Asia, where the predominant form of agriculture is small farmers, family farmers, and where large portion of the population in India, 55% of the population. So same is the case with Asia. So this particular statement is so critical. And it's also important to note that we are dealing with a broken system, food system, which was brought out so prominently. The fishers were brought out so prominently due to the COVID, and therefore the urgency of fixing it. And there is one more, I would say, I wouldn't call it urgency, I would call it emergency, the climate emergency. I think this really, because this is going to impact on the producers, is already impacting and is going to impact even more if we don't apply a climate emergency lens to each of the solution areas. I also liked, I think, Estrella's point that most affected, I think Agnes said that, most affected and therefore most to benefit from transformation. So this is the points already made, and so grateful to Martin for taking us through the whole food system summit processes, and from where the solutions have come, the way they have been filtered, the way they have been categorized under different action tracks, and the now what is the next step in that. And it was, of course, very educational for me in particular from Hijaba's perspective on the pastoralists. And I really like the points that he made about how much they contribute to positive impacts on the environment. And I think that is something which needs to be studied. Otherwise, we are seeing the, I also like the point you made, Ajay, that we should not be looking at animal husbandry with one lens. There is an industrial animal husbandry, and there's also a smallholders animal husbandry, which is so much in harmony with the environment. And I'm so grateful to the leads from the action tracks, the kind of points that each one of them has made so eloquently and in such a short period of time. What I picked up is the critical role of the agency of farmers, fishers, pastoralists, agency of women, indigenous people. So I think the centrality of agency is very, very critical, and there must be some very practical approaches on how this agency needs to be built up. There are very good large-scale success stories, and also the focus of Action Track 4 on workers' rights is, I mean, absolutely spot on. Action Track 3 has three simple words, but there's so much depth behind that. Protect, manage, restore, and producer centrality in each of these three dimensions is so critical. And I believe game changer solutions are really required on the restoration part, because once the restoration part is picks up momentum, then automatically the pressure on protection will come down, because we are not further degrading lands. And your own essay on Action Track 2, safe food, nutritious food, and more food. So I think all three are again intricately linked to the role of the producers, and especially the nutritious food and safe food are also linked to the way in which food is produced. And I saw references to agroecology, regenerative agriculture, and I saw in the chat box the need to eliminate chemicals in agriculture. So all this is linked to the food that we are eating, whether it is grown on land or the fish are consuming the poisons that we are putting on land. So I see the most difficult part is safe food, which again producers have such a central role in this. And I really liked one statement which was made by Action Track 1 is on nutrition sensitive agriculture extension, and also response to the question that nutrition food should become more affordable. I think this is how things that I picked up. And I also believe that when it comes to the producers' empowerment, we have underinvested in the capacities. So I think I'm running out of time. I just want to say, David brought out very well the role of the various dialogues. And I just want to mention 3 points there, that the SDG lens, the climate lens, and the producer's perspective in all the action track solutions. The fact that there's greater involvement of the countries in the national dialogues, again, a very important point that has come out. I just want to conclude by saying, that as you also mentioned, that for questions not addressed during the session, we already informed that the participants will receive follow-up answers after the event. And one final appeal to all the participants. Thank you for being with us for this 2-hour dialogue. We also request you to follow the Food System Summit channels, whether the community platforms, website, social media, to stay updated. Thank you very much, Ajay, and thanks to the UNFSS for having me here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you, Martin, for leading this.
Bye-bye.
Thank you once again. Thank you, Vijayji.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
We are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today